Hey everybody, video here for you today. This is something I just thought I'd talk about. I've had a lot of comments, a lot of messages, and a lot of people wondering about this subject, and it's a subject of giants and the mound builders and that whole deal. This continually comes up on my comments and my messages, and I've had a lot of interesting comments and messages, and I know Budcat7 over there is doing a series on the giants, and he's going state by state, and I will leave the link for his channel below. But I thought I would address this today, and a lot of my videos are evidence-based, what the ancients tell us what happened, and things that we can really grasp onto. So this is a difficult subject for me to really get into and verify, but we have so many stories of large people, and some of them in my Mound Builders series, certainly they were over 7 feet tall. Is that a giant? No, it's as big as the largest person today. But in ancient times, over 7 feet tall, and it depends how, the mound builders, they're 1,000 years ago, they're 3,000 years ago. How do we specify each group of mound builder? But 7 feet tall would have been huge, very tall, almost mythical. But certainly there are a lot of old newspaper reports, and without a skeleton to go with them, how much can you verify them? But certainly a lot of them matched up in what they were saying. But I just thought I would read this article. It says, Mysterious Accounts of Lost Giants in Branch County, Michigan. In his 1948 monograph, A Study of the Glacial Cave Culture in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, Wilbur Cunningham accidentally set up a honey trap for future giantologists when he described some skeletal remains excavated in Branch County, Michigan in 1906. Mr. Birch insisted that at least one of the skeletons was equipped with 2 rows of teeth of fantastic claim. Cunningham also notes that the physician who measured the bones is said to have made the statement that 2 of the skeletons were unusually large persons. There's not much discussion of the Branch County giants on the internet, which is understandable since there's not much to go on. One of the few posts referencing the remains titled Large Skull, Branch County, Michigan, but the URL refers to Indiana, and they cite a book focusing on the Ohio Valley. It's nothing more than a short rehashing of Wilbur Cunningham's 1948 research on the 1906 incident with a few vaguely related pictures. None pertain to the incident itself. This post presents information from a news source, a 1906 newspaper article, and compares it to Cunningham's 1948 report. In Omaha, for example, they discovered a skull that Professor Henry Osborne of Columbia University believed to predate the Lansing skull, meaning the Omaha skull would have been over 150,000 years old. In the same year as these discoveries, Clark L. Birch discovered multiple skeletons in a mound on his property, some of which were declared to be the remains of giants, or at least very large men. The Birch farm was situated between the town line for Coldwater and Batavia townships in southern Michigan. The mound in which Clark Birch located the remains, either 2 or 5 sets depending on which source you follow, was regularly used by several local residents as a source of sand or gravel. On November 14, 1906, the article in the Courier newspaper described the discovery of skeletons. Birch mentioned that this incident in 1906 wasn't the first time they had removed skeletons from the mound on his property. Roughly 3 decades prior, the brother of Ezra Shoecraft stumbled upon several skeletons that Birch described as gigantic. I haven't had any success with finding any mention of these skeletons outside of the newspaper article. In the case of the skeletons Birch dug up in 1906, the 2 of them were reported to have been complete and buried in an upright sitting position while facing each other with artifacts in their laps, and buried in a sitting up position. That has been declared in reports from all over ancient America, and I've read a few of those on my videos at least. And here is some of the stuff that was found after carefully unearthing the skeletons. Birch roughly estimated the height of one of the skeletons by comparing the length of the femur and the tibia on the top of each other against his body. Based on this exercise, Birch estimated that the two skeletons must be around 9 feet tall. At some point, the remains were moved into Birch's house and examined by a Dr. Gamble, who thought of himself as something of an archaeologist. Dr. Gamble proceeded to announce that the remains were several thousand years old. Beyond the estimated age, the newspaper article gives the sparse details of the two skeletons in question. One of them is reporting as missing several teeth. In contrast to that, the other is reported as having 32 perfect teeth and a larger than average jaw. The article goes into the mention that the skeletons were buried with several different types of artifacts, including beads and sandal sole gorgets. While in Coldwater in the 1940s, Wilbur Cunningham tried to trace the history of the 1906 discovery. The doctor who examined the bodies, Dr. Gamble, was dead. The photographer who accompanied Dr. Gamble, he told Cunningham that although he remembered documenting the remains, the photographic plates were destroyed and he didn't believe there were any remaining copies. The real kicker is this: after Dr. Gamble examined the skeletons, they were, for the most part, dropped in a corn crib and left there. Sometime between 1906 and when Cunningham visited the Birch farm, the building burned down. Of the skeletons dug up from Birch's Mound, Cunningham was able to get one of the skulls examined. The skull in question was recorded as missing its lower jaw. It's unknown whether or not this was one of the giant skulls. Along with having the remaining skull that could be locally examined, Cunningham also interviewed Dr. Clark Birch about the 1906 discovery. For the most part, his account matches up with the account that he gave in 1906. There is a section in Cunningham's summary of his interview with Birch that stands out as odd. Birch, while discussing the skeletons, mentioned that one of them happened to have double row of teeth, taken as evidence by today's giantologists. Cunningham dismisses this as a similar thread in many accounts of giants and theorized that the double row of teeth may have just been irregular spacing, and that should be taken with speculation and kind of questioning. Although Cunningham's explanation is a neat one, the 1906 article shows that it is not correct. Within that account, the author mentions that one of the skulls, the one with the abnormally large jaw, has 32 perfect teeth, not one of which shows a sign of decay. That's exactly the right number of teeth to make 2 perfect rows of teeth, or a double row of teeth. It's very likely that Birch was using an old idiom that Cunningham was unfamiliar with, simply describing that the skeleton had 2 healthy rows of teeth. Cunningham didn't understand the meaning of idiom, which had fallen out of use by the 1940s, and took double row of teeth to mean irregular placement of teeth. At the end of things, here is what we have in relation to Birch's giant skeletons: a newspaper account, Cunningham's survey of the site, a skull that may or may not have been one of the reported giants, and a few artifacts that remained in the mound after the skeletons were removed. What we don't have here is definitive proof of giants in Branch County, Michigan, unless someone can dig up the photos that were taken in 1906. I don't believe we will be seeing anything that could definitively show that skeletons Clark Birch dug up were in fact giants. But certain things in this story I thought were fascinating. The fact that these supposedly were found sitting up matches other places. These artifacts matches other places where large skeletons were found. But when you get down to it, how much faith can you put on an estimate that a skeleton was 9 feet tall? I think this is a fascinating subject. This is ancient origins. And Cass County, Michigan, this came from a newspaper article. It says portions of the skeletons were in a good state of preservation. The femur or thigh bone of one of the males, which Dr. Bonine has now in his possession, is of great size and indicates that its owner must have been at least 7 feet in height. So we have a lot of different descriptions of the height of these individuals, or some of them kind of sensationalized for newspaper articles, the equivalent of clicks today. To sell newspapers today, people kind of sensationalize evidence for views on YouTube. It's kind of the same thing. But one thing is clear, we had large individuals over 7 feet tall. That is clear. Are they giants? Well, that is all up for the individual interpretation, I guess. But we had them buried all over the ancient United States. This is the Criel Mound and Adena Mound coming from West Virginia. But I will leave this link below. I used it in my video for the Criel Mound, and I know Smithsonian is in the title of that video. And that's a whole murky subject. The Smithsonian seemed to be investigating a lot of these sites before they were excavated. Seems they took control of the bones. But these days I have read some reports where the Smithsonian kind of laughs that off and says they never had these bones in their possession at any time. So who are you going to believe? I think the only way maybe to get some answers is to give the Smithsonian a call. But there is a lot of newspaper accounts going back 100, 125, 130 years that had documentation of giants found in mounds. Now, the actual size, that is up for debate. Some of it wasn't done by the most reliable research methods, so that should be thought about too. But certainly, we had indications all over that there was large people over 7 feet tall. How old are these people? Good research should have been done, but where are these today? It's all a big question. But how much reliability can you put on old newspaper accounts that varied? But how can you dismiss them when kind of the same thing is written across wide regions of the ancient United States? But certainly an interesting topic to think about and discuss. So that's why I'm making this video. Hope you thought this was interesting. I will leave the links below, and you all have a very nice night.